Hi, Jason and Shelley Martinkus here with another quick video. And in this video, we're going to talk about this thing that's been coming up a ton lately in the office. I've heard it on our live webinars. I've heard it in sessions. I've gotten emails about it. And it's this thing where wives over and over again are saying, I feel like I'm losing myself, or I've lost myself in this process. Mm-hmm. And a lot of wives even say that in recovery. Like, not only did they lose themselves in his addiction and his story, but like even in recovery, they feel like they lose themselves, because then it becomes all about recovery, right? Mm-hmm. It's like they didn't get a chance to be who they were going to really be in the marriage. And now focus on recovery is all on him and all the stuff that's got to happen and blah, blah, blah. So now she's still not even able to be herself. I don't know. Yeah. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting because when you brought that up, I was thinking, you know what? I feel like that right now. In the midst of quarantine, I have said that over the last 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I think that might be a part of the grieving process whenever we lose things. And I was a little confused with what you just said. It sounds like you were saying women feel like they've lost themselves in recovery, but then they also feel like they've lost themselves in their husband's recovery. I felt like you had two different things you were talking about there.
Yeah. So it's like a wife will say, after 2 decades of our story and now boom, everything is hit the fan. Like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Like, what is this life that I thought was my life?
Yep.
But then also, I'll talk to wives who they're 2.5 years into recovery.
I see.
And they'll say, I don't even know who I am. Like, I lost my life to his addiction, and now everything's been about like his addiction and recovery and all the stuff.
And her recovery too, right? Like the group and the one-on-ones and the conferences and workshops and books and okay.
Totally.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that. So I'm like, you know what? I really think it's part of our grief and acknowledging. It makes sense that women feel like they've lost themselves, because truly there's been a death of the marriage, mm-hmm. and then there's also kind of been this death of who they thought they were.
Like death of an identity.
Yeah. So I get that. I feel like I experienced that as well, and I feel like I'm experiencing it anew in this really tricky time mm-hmm. that we're in as well. And it can feel really powerless, because it's like, what do I do now? Like, we can't go back to the way it was.
Right.
And I know for some women, they're like, I just wish we could go back to the way it was. And at some point in the recovery process, women are like, I don't want to go back to the way it was. They see like there was so much dysfunction, there was so much hurt, so much pain, so much loneliness. Even if they didn't know, even if there wasn't a ton of dysfunction in the marriage, and even if he wasn't, there's a lot of women that deal with a fairly mean husband, but that's not always the case. And so even if he wasn't mean, even if he was super kind, typically there's women will share that they knew something was missing.
Yeah.
And so at some point they're like, no, I don't want to go back to the way it was.
Right.
But that's not always the case early on.
I think what else is hard is, for a lot of wives that I talk to, it's like the only option that starts to look appealing or like possible for any semblance of getting themselves back is to get away from him. So I hear a lot of wives talk about, like, I'm thinking about separating. I'm really seriously considering divorce, because I feel like until I get away from him, I'm never going to be able to find me. And that's super scary, for the husband sitting there going, okay, I what do I do? How do I help you get you back in the middle of my recovery? But what people don't know, and what I think goes unspoken a lot of times, is that if a husband does really good recovery work, and that recovery work isn't self-centric, mm-hmm. it's actually the recovery work that creates safe space in the marriage and for the wife, that she discovers more fully who she is in the context of the relationship, mm-hmm. not outside of it.
Right.
But that's a ton of work and responsibility for the husband.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say that to a wife. Like, If he
Hold
does
on.
right, if you just wait till he does something really good, then you'll find out who you really are.
Right.
That's just a hard thing to sell somebody, you know, like to tell them.
So what have you been telling women because it sounds like you've heard it a lot in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
What have you been telling women when they're in that space? What do you feel like has been something, that would help women listening?
I mean, the first is that
And then I'll answer my question.
I was going to say, yeah. The first is that it's super valid. It's you have lost yourself, and even what they say, right? I think I said this to you earlier. I had a wife say, "I hate him that he's made me someone who hates him."
Yeah.
Like even that,
deep.
it is deep, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's totally valid that you feel like you've lost a part of yourself because you have. Like that's just real. You have, and even in recovery, like that's real. So first is valid. The second is you might need space to find more of yourself. But I would tell you to do that with what you teach in the context of healthy detachment. Not necessarily that we need 6 months of separation out of house and separate living arrangements, but like detaching emotionally from him and the process, not fully, that's not what we're talking about, healthily, that can really be an important part of the process for a wife. Another thing then is actually looking at his recovery. Let me say this a little bit differently. There's schools of thought on recovery. Y'all have heard us talk about this before. There's schools of thought on recovery. Some schools of thought are there's his recovery, her recovery, and then maybe if they get healthy, they'll be their recovery. And we don't buy that. That's not how we roll. We think that his recovery is her recovery is his recovery because it's their recovery.
Yeah, we're all about the coupleship, and you
Yes.
get hurt in relationships and you heal in relationships.
Right.
And sure, there's some nuances there where if things aren't going well, maybe there does need to be some time for her to get safe. Like we're all about that, but our hope is that the work you do with men, you can help them make it a safe space for her to heal within the context of the marriage.
That's right. And so that's part of the conversation that I have with the couples is like, let's get a season where she's not meeting your needs. She's off the hook from being someone to you in that way. Let's let her figure out who she is without having to meet your needs. Let's let her have space to just be a mom rather than having to be such a wife right now. You don't ever stop being a wife in the context of the marriage, but you can be off the hook from some of that stuff, especially emotionally. And then last, for a lot of guys, I'm having a conversation with the husbands going, her finding herself is your responsibility. Like that's part of your role is to help her become all that she's designed to be. Whereas a lot of guys will be in the place of like, all I can do is my recovery and I just do what I can do. I just take care of my side of the street. And it's like, no. You can
foster
right.
like that. Yeah.
That's right. You can create space for her to become who she needs to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't think of it like that. Actually. Like I just didn't think of it as like that he can really help her. I get what you're saying, and even encouraging her to let me say it a little bit differently. As I was thinking about how I would answer, I was thinking like, okay, let's talk about some things you can do to regain yourself. I wasn't really thinking about how in that process, and even right now for me, as I feel like I've lost myself in this quarantine and I'm looking at regaining myself, I actually do need your support. Like, I need you to take care of the boys so that I can go do something that feels more like me. I need you to be encouraging me and speaking into me and telling me the truth, because I have so many lies in my head saying you're a failure, you can't keep up with it all, you can't do it, you might as well quit. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's what yesterday's conversation was about in changing the schedule.
Yeah.
Right? That was me going, I have to create space for you to be who you need to be, which is for you to see your clients, right, and do one-on-one work. you need space that you don't have to like parent while you're seeing clients.
Right.
So I can facilitate that. And if I facilitate that, not only will you do better with your clients, but then you'll roll out of there and be a better mom because you've been able to be who you need to be.
Yes, yes. But let me tell you something. And I know we're just like totally going on all these rabbit trails, but this is really important. It is still today really hard for me to allow you to meet my needs. That's not the case for every wife that has gone through betrayal. And I'm sure there's some idiosyncrasies just from my childhood, etc., that are playing in. But even you being like, okay, come on, I feel like so often you've been like, we're a team. We can do this together. You're like having to remind me. And my default is just, nope. I'll just do what I can on my own.
Just take care of you.
Right. And so I'm just saying, like, for someone early in recovery, I mean, we're 16 years, almost 17 years into recovery.
Slow track.
Yeah. That was hilarious. But even more so for someone that's 1 or 2 years in to their recovery, for her to trust that he is being genuine and saying, let me help you. Let me change my work schedule to give you some time to go do something that will foster your creativity or that will help you feel more like you used to. That's really hard for a wife to do. Yeah. To trust him that he's not going to throw it back in her face or expect XYZ or what have you.
Punish her later.
Yeah. So, okay, so can I just say a couple things and we'll wrap up?
Yep.
Okay. So I think for wives, and I just alluded to this, when you're in that space where you're like, I feel like I've lost myself and I feel like I've lost who I am, I think first and foremost is just recognizing it. That is really big. Mm-hmm. And to voice it.
To be able to name that's what's going on.
Because I think a lot of times, like for me, I'm just kind of walking around kind of like, what's going on? But once I have words for it, that makes such a big difference for me. So number one is to name it, to just acknowledge its presence. And then I think where I'm at right now, because I so feel like that speaks to where I'm at, is I'm like, okay, I need to figure out how can I better connect to myself and add in a couple of things that help me feel like me, if you will.
Like what?
So, like going out and playing with the boys in the front yard. Like that makes me want to cry. That brings me so much joy. And so like on Tuesday night, I was just like, I don't care what it takes. Like, I don't care what plate stops spinning. I was like, we're going to get out spike ball and we're going to play. And it like made me feel like the Shelley I know, so that's been really big, is like play with the boys in the front yard. I did it again before I came up here just this morning. Like just riding my bike around. Even last night, one of our kids left his watch in someone's backyard, social distanced, but backyard. And I was like, just leave it on your front porch and I'll come get it. So I was done with my group calls, and like at 10:30, Jason and I are biking through the neighborhood, 10:30 p.m. to go get Harrison's watch. And that was intentional, because I'm like, I'm trying to find myself in the midst of what feels like so much loss. Yeah. So I also think just being able to name what we've lost and grieving that, and then also again thinking about like, well, what are the little things that bring me joy? So for instance, I'm like, like in this season, I'm like, I really want to garden and I want to plant my flowers, and we haven't done that yet. And I'm just like, I know that will bring me at least some joy in this season of waiting. So I don't know that was very concise, but hopefully that at least gives some, pointers of what to do. So, yeah.
So I'm hearing that we need to go to the garden center.
Yes, we do. This weekend. for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope we can. So,
Anything else you want to say?
nope.
Okay. We'll stop there. Hope that's helpful.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, y'all.